We are going to be using a unit that was created by Mrs. Burns, another forensic science teacher that created a whole unit for crime scene investigation for virtual classes. So we're going to go through her material because it is well done, and then by the time you hopefully get back to hybrid, we will actually do a crime scene and follow the steps on a real one. So, sometimes a single piece of evidence can help solve a case or prevent the wrong person from being arrested. So when CSI officers come in, their job is to collect as much as possible because you really don't know sometimes what's evidence and what's not. So the goal of crime scene investigation is to recognize, document, and collect evidence at the scene of the crime. We've talked about Locard principle before. When any two objects come into contact with each other, they transfer evidence. A lot of times the material that's transferred is called trace evidence. It can be found both on the person or the object that were in contact. So not only is it the material that's left behind, but some of the material in the room should also be on that particular person. The longer the period of time they're in contact, the more material transfers. So some common types of trace evidence: pet hair, human hair, fingerprints, soil or something that's tracked in by your shoes, drops of blood, and fiber that comes off of clothing. So evidence can be classified into, and we kind of went through this, two categories: direct and indirect. So direct evidence was firsthand observation, eyewitnesses, police videos, or cameras. In court, direct evidence includes eyewitness testimonies and confessions. Circumstantial evidence or indirect evidence. Indirect evidence can point towards a person, but it is the physical evidence that is picked up at the crime scene. So it can be used to imply a fact but not directly prove it. It can be either physical, biological, or trace evidence that's considered to be circumstantial. Unless you get a positive DNA test, a lot of the court cases are based on circumstantial evidence, that all of the fingerprinting, the hair, the fiber samples point to one particular person. So difference between some of the different types of physical evidence. So you have biological evidence. It's also sometimes called the serology unit. Bodily fluids, hair, plant parts, natural fibers, anything that came from a living organism. So biological evidence will be considered to be class evidence unless it's DNA. It usually reduces suspects into a smaller group, or it can be individualized evidence if it is DNA and be more persuasive in court. Physical evidence is like fingerprints, footprints, weapons, tool marks, etc. It reduces the number of suspects to a smaller group of individuals. So most physical evidence is considered to be class evidence. So we've talked about that before. Class evidence narrows it to a group of persons. Individual evidence narrows it to a single person or thing. So when the crime scene is encountered and they call people in, the people that are present, number one, police officers, they are usually the first ones to arrive. District attorney may accompany them if there's a possibility that a warrant is needed. Crime scene investigators, their job is to document the crime scene, detail and collect the physical evidence. They might record data, sketch the scene, take photographs, and collect evidence. Medical examiner or the coroner determines the cause of death for homicides. Detectives will come in, and their job is to interview witnesses and to talk to the crime scene investigators about evidence to find leads. And then there are specialists depending on the cases. Entomologists, forensic scientists, forensic psychologists may also be consulted if the evidence needs their expertise. So there are 7 S's of CSI. So first one is securing the scene. So the first responding police officer or the first responder has 2 priorities. One, to make sure that to ensure the safety of all of the individuals in the area. 2, to preserve the evidence, to protect the crime scene, restrict people who are not supposed to be there from entering the scene, and he keeps a log of all of the visitors in and out. And then 3, depending on the crime scene, the first responder may ask for backup from the various teams of experts that would need to come in. Step number 2, they need to separate the witnesses. Witnesses must not be allowed to talk to each other in order to prevent them from working together or creating a story or collusion. Sometimes that's on purpose, but sometimes that's on accident. We talked about the fact that memory is not always accurate, and if you talk to somebody else, you can fit pieces in that you don't remember, and you think you actually remember them yourself. So each of the eyewitnesses need to be asked, when did it occur? Who called in the crime? Who is the victim? Can the perpetrator be identified? What did you see happen? And where were you when you observed the crime? Third one is scanning the scene. Forensics examiners need to scan to determine where photos could be taken. Sometimes there are more than one crime scene. We talked about this before. There can be a primary and a secondary crime scene. So it may have been taken place at one so the murder may have taken place at one place, which is the primary. Corpse may be found in another, which is the secondary. You may have that somebody was abducted and held someplace, which is the primary, and they are found in another location, which is called secondary. The crime scene investigator needs to see the crime, so they take photos of the overall area. Close-up photos with or without a measuring ruler should be taken. Triangulation, which we'll get into next week, of stationary objects should include reference points, so it's where you measure the location in the room. A view of the crime scene should be taken from different angles and distances. Several close-up photos of any evidence or bodies should also be taken. Realize once all of this stuff is processed and collected, you do not have the opportunity to go back and photograph. So that has to be the first thing that's done. And while you are photographing before the evidence is collected, you have to measure the location in the room so that you know exactly where it was. Sketching the crime scene, and we will be getting to that next week. So I will make another video for next week talking about how you sketch it, and you are going to, I think on Monday, actually set up a small crime scene that you're going to sketch and practice triangulation and different measurement methods. So from here you are going to do the observation routine observation assignment, where you are going to read about the crime scene, miniature crime scenes that were created, and work on your observation skills. You can also be working on the CK12 chapter and make sure that you have the homework for the unit so far completed.